2025 could be the beginning of the end for the United States and the dollar. And it's not why you think it is. It's not because of tariffs or necessarily because of Trump. It's actually a nuclear bomb that is hitting. Not an actual one, but a financial one, unlike anything the United States has ever seen. And its impact is greatly unknown. But we do know it will be devastating for the United States. So we all know that government spending and debt has been a problem, and it's been a problem for a while. And that kind of makes it this monotonous thing that it's just like we get, we understand, but the short-term implications aren't widely known. And in fact, year to year, there really aren't any. Like, there's not that big of a deal. But 2025, something very different is happening. And it's not just the debt, but something else that's going on. So to understand, really quickly, let's take a look at something a lot of us already know. And that's that the United States is absolutely addicted to debt. Over the last 221 years, we racked up roughly $12 trillion right around 2015, just since 2020. And this number is actually larger given the last few months. Now, that is all relative, meaning how much debt you have to how much growth you have and to the cost of the debt. That's actually not necessarily the problem, and not the problem necessarily with 2025. You see, the United States has racked up $34 trillion over that in debt. The average interest rate that we're paying on that debt is right around 2.5. Now, we racked up vast amounts of debt in a very short period of time. How quickly had a strange effect, meaning the timing on when that debt rolls over or comes due. Think about a house. You have a house, you have a 30-year mortgage. When you get to the end of that mortgage, your house should be paid off. That's the beauty of a 30-year mortgage. But that is very unique and only in housing. Debt actually doesn't work like that. All other debt comes in periods that is vastly shorter. We're talking about 5, 10, maybe 15, 20 years. That is more common, but still, most of it is right around 10 years. Now, the United States has a choice. They can take out debt and make it long-term debt or short-term. Well, why would anyone do short-term if you can do it long-term? Because long-term debt tends to cost more. The interest rate will be higher. Why? Because it's more unknown. Short-term debt tends to be cheaper. Think about if you have a 30-year fixed mortgage or if you had a floating interest rate as opposed to a fixed. A floating interest rate will be much, much cheaper. What that means is politicians don't think outside their terms. So what they did is they chose short periods to get a lower interest rate to make those liabilities smaller. So we racked up trillions upon trillions of dollars in debt in a short period of time. That is a ticking time bomb, which in 2025 goes off. You see, in 2025, this year, we have roughly 30% of our debt comes due. Now, that in itself actually isn't necessarily the problem. But government spending has another effect, and that is that it creates inflation. Not only does it create inflation, but it also makes the viability of a country a little less uncertain. So in order to get inflation to stop, you have to get rid of money. The Fed does that by lifting interest rates. Inflation, due to government spending, creates a need to have interest rates go up by the Federal Reserve. They're trying to stop inflation. Interest rates makes money harder to get. So there's less money in the system, which makes inflation go down. Now, the less uncertain you are that somebody's going to pay you back because their financial situation is worse, the higher interest rates go. Because I need to be paid more because I don't know if you're going to pay me back. That has also taken place. The main issue is the cost of money. Meaning that if you borrow $1 trillion and it costs you nothing to borrow it, and you make trillions of dollars, the amount is all relative. But when the government spends lots of money, it puts more money into the system, which creates inflation. Because we had low interest rates and massive government spending, we had inflation. How do you stop inflation? You increase interest rates. Debt is money. You increase interest rates, the cost of debt is high, so nobody borrows. That means the money pool, or the amount of money out there, stops growing and hopefully will even shrink. That makes inflation go down. That's why the government jacked up interest rates, or the Fed jacked up interest rates, and we had inflation start to cool down. But the government didn't want us to go into a recession, and it wanted to keep spending. So, although interest rates went up, the government spent, and not only did the government spend, the amount of money that the government spent that actually contributed to money supply. Not all government spending is the same, but this is money that got injected in and contributed to the economy more money. That skyrocketed, obviously, during COVID, but it never came down. What that did was, as you can see here, we have an inflation rate. Inflation rate went up. Why? Due to low debt, meaning free money, so the economy used a ton. But also, at the same time, government spending went up. Inflation shot up. In order to stop inflation, interest rates shot up, and interest rates calmed down. But they could not come back to anywhere close to where they'd been. Why? Because even though interest rates were up, government spending continued to go up, therefore continuing to pour money into the economy. Simply put, the larger the money supply is, the more people buy goods and services, and we overinflate. That's what causes inflation. Price of goods and services skyrocket. You can even have hyperinflation, which destroys an economy. That's terrifying. So you have to stop the money. They did that in the economy, or the private sector, by shutting off the ability for so many people to get money. Like, think about trying to buy a home today, or refinancing your home and taking money out. Almost impossible for literally an entire generation. As this happened, inflation slowed down. But that's not the only way money goes into the economy. You see, the government bloated to being 40+% of our entire economic activity and pouring money into the system. Interest rates couldn't go down anymore because the inflation rate kept staying relatively sensitive, or not where we wanted it to be. It was so sensitive, the mere mention of lowering interest rates increased economic activity and in fact spiked inflation. So they've had to hold it down, and inflation went up at the beginning of this year. What that means, interest rates just have not been able to come down, all while borrowing has gone up. These two things, the amount of money that we owe and how much we have to pay, has come to a head in 2020, and the effects are mind-blowing. You see, with the new interest rate, which is almost double what it used to be, and the new debt, we have 30% of that needs to be refied. Our average interest rate goes up, the payment then goes up. And the amount we have to pay just in interest to cover our debt in 2025 could be over $1.3 trillion. And let's put that into perspective. That is more than basically every single category of spending that the government even has. We will spend more, and in some cases almost twice as much, as things like defense, health programs, and it will be almost as large, if not larger, than the largest payments we have, and that's Social Security. When that much payments come on, the government stops being able to pay for not only other things, but it has to take on more debt. We run a deficit. The spread between what we are paying today versus the change coming in 2025 is hundreds of billions of dollars. This has a very strange effect. You see, money, borrowing, economic activity, it goes in cycles. Short-term cycles we view as recessions. Ray Dalio talks a lot about this. We have what are long-term and short-term cycles. As you can see here, the short-term cycles are recessions and growth. Recessions and growth. Recessions are a very normal part of economic activity and are necessary. This slowdown and growth of the economy is what we call the business cycle. This business cycle goes up and down, up and down. We have long-term debt cycles, though. The long-term debt cycles are in times like the Great Depression. You take on so much debt that you can no longer use money and debt in a normal way because the cost goes so high. Essentially, the debt crushes economic activity. You can't borrow as much. A lot of people can't borrow, but they definitely can't make payments. When debt gets so high and you have a downturn in the short-term cycle, all of a sudden that downturn doesn't allow people to be able to pay these debts they've taken on. Why? Because they're not making as much. This causes defaults, bankruptcies. This spurs out of control, and the long-term debt cycle contracts. It has to get rid of debt. We've seen this like the Great Depression. This is what a lot of people assumed 2008 was, and it actually was to a large extent. But here's the difference. In 2008 versus the Great Depression, when you go bankrupt, the debt literally disappears. That money goes away out of the economy. That's why people lose jobs, and it's really harsh. That money just dries up. But instead of just allowing institutions, financial partners, businesses to go bankrupt, what they did was they transferred. The private sector and economy transferred its debt and liabilities to the government. They did this in two ways. First of all, the Fed actually bought toxic assets, but then they did massive bailouts where the government spent money into the private sector, taking on debt for all the taxpayers. Taxpayers bailed out the private sector, and we took on debt to do that. So it's not necessarily that the liabilities even went away. They just changed to a large extent. And this continued, and it got worse in COVID. Once this happened, the government literally took on all the responsibility of the entire economy, transferring it over here. And this is why it's different. The long-term debt cycle that we may be approaching is not one of the economy. It's easy for people to go bankrupt. It's not good. It's bad, but it's easy. They just lose everything. They lose their assets, their bank accounts, they have to start all over again. Businesses can go bankrupt and fire everyone. That's not how it works with governments, though. Governments can't just go bankrupt and nothing happens to the private sector. The United States is the reserve currency. When the United States can't pay its bills, to get debt to pay for all the things it has to pay for, interest rates go up and up and up. This becomes a vicious cycle. And how does a government get rid of debt? Well, when you stop paying on debt or go bankrupt as a government, you are screwing countries that took out your debt and the private citizens. It is a death knell. It collapses currencies. Nobody will give money, and that credit that makes everything goes dries up. The government will tank the economy, and in a way that doesn't allow the government to help it or save it when it's having problems. It is a vicious cycle, and it's devastating for any country. In 2025, as we have 30% of our debt, $10 trillion, to put in perspective, that was the total amount of debt our government had not even 15 years ago, which at the time was viewed as insane that our government had $10 trillion in debt. Just 10 to 15 years ago is all coming due in 2025, 30% of all our debt. It's happening at the same time that because of inflation, interest rates are double what they were, higher than we've seen. That makes those payments skyrocket. will this be a cascading effect that will in turn make it so interest rates can't not only come down, but even go higher? That the government can't pay its bills. Why? Because this is one round. Our debt keeps turning over, and a lot of it over the next 5 years. If interest rates can't come down, in fact, they go higher, all the next rounds over the next 5 years, 5 trillion plus, those interest rates are higher, the payments go even higher, and it creates a downward cycle. Or will we be able to pull it off, make the payments, make the cuts necessary, become fiscally responsible, and start to get our house back in order before it's too late? Or better yet, is the government currently engaging in activities to actually create a recession? So that way interest rates will drop when they have to pay off $10 trillion. So the interest rate they have to pay drops back down to normal, eliminating hundreds of billions of dollars in debt payments. There's a lot going on. And 2025 is a pivotal turning point for the United States. It has never faced anything like this. But it's important. This isn't the economy. This is the government. And it's not the same. And their problem is a problem that no one can escape from. So I make good financial decisions, and I do not count on depressions, mastering everything else, because I don't ever know. And I found that people that always plan for the world ending, they just never actually go anywhere. One of the problems is, as much as we can see this huge issue and problem, what we can't see is the solutions to fix it.
Right.
So this happened like in 2008, where it's like the world should have ended, like legitimately. The banks should have stopped spitting out cash. They were all under, like not only under, they were so negative, no bank in the United States could borrow, could do anything. They had no money. The world should have ended. But the government figured out a solution, right or wrong, to stop the world from ending that was not known prior. So I don't know what solutions people will figure out, but we tend to be really good at solving problems, even if it's kicking the can down the road. And the reason why I also don't plan on it is, if it happens, it doesn't matter anyways.
Right.
Like, people are like, well, if you're doing that, why are you growing your business? Because if there's a depression, I'm bankrupt anyways. It doesn't matter. It doesn't change anything. Right. We're all gone. Right. Like, nothing, like, I can't escape it. You can't, it doesn't matter. Literally, it's just, we're all gone. So then the only other option is you don't do anything, and then you're years behind. You're not moving forward, right? So if it happens, I'm going to deal with it when it happens. I can't control it. I can't fix it. And there's no escaping it if it does.